Animal Crossing is at its heart a game series about small details in pursuit of achieving atmosphere. No detail is smaller and no atmosphere better achieved than that of enjoying a cup of coffee at the Roost. For 20 years, players have been able to walk into a cozy cafe, sit at the counter, and pay a humble price for a cup, always drunk in a few hearty gulps. There is no gamification here besides developing your bond with owner barista Brewster. It is simply a digital cup of coffee and a cafe atmosphere to enjoy. That all being said, let's take a step back. Is this coffee actually any good? Does this bird know what he's doing? And what does pigeon milk taste like? Hi everybody, I'm Raccoon. And in this week's Animal Crossing Month video, we're going to be answering all of these questions and more as we dive deep into the coffee pot at gaming's most iconic cafe. I'm going to break everything down to the best of my ability as we try to determine once and for all how good the coffee is in Animal Crossing. A natural place for us to start is the coffee itself, or rather, the coffee beans. In most of the games, we are given little indication of the varieties available, but those who played New Leaf will remember that Brewster offers 4: Blue Mountain, Kilimanjaro, Mocha, and a blend. The blend is simplest to understand, a blend of beans from different geographic origins meant to form a new flavor profile, reduce costs, or ideally both. In my experience, blends are distributed as discrete varieties, but in New Leaf, Pete seems to be under the impression that the blend is the other beans blended together. This could be the case, but for our purposes I'll be assuming that Pete is mistaken and the blend is its own variety. The other 3 are left a mystery to people who aren't into coffee, and indeed as a young teenager who knew nothing about it, I sort of assumed that they were fictional. Let's take Blue Mountain. Growing up in the Appalachian United States, I always chose this variety as my preferred beans, but it's not just any Blue Mountain. This seemingly refers specifically to Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee, a rare and valuable origin that is seemingly especially popular in Japanese coffee culture. Its flavor profile is described as being subtly acidic, with a notable sweetness, evoking chocolate, nuts, and berries. JBM is so popular in Japan that the country consumes about 2/3 of all that is produced. It is a hallmark of Japanese coffee culture. Also popular in Japan is Kilimanjaro, another highly regarded crop that is grown, as you'd expect, on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro. Like most African coffees, it is especially fruity, acidic, and bright. The last variety, Mocha, might seem simple. It seemingly refers to coffee with chocolate added, but that wouldn't make much sense as a bean variety. Yes, chocolate-flavored coffee beans do exist, but when comparing this to the others, I have something else in mind. Etymologically, the name Mocha for coffee with chocolate comes from Mocha, a port city in Yemen that was a hub of nation coffee trade. Coffee from Yemen was said to taste especially of chocolate, hence the later derived name. Coffee is still grown in Yemen today as a specialty single origin, and this is what I suspect Brewster's Mocha actually is, a rich, chocolatey single origin coffee from Yemen. So, what does our dissection of Brewster's coffees tell us? Predominantly, I think it conveys an immense commitment to quality and diversity of flavor. This is a high-end establishment. Secondarily, the coffees available indicate how deeply rooted the Roost is in Japanese coffee culture specifically, which is only natural for the cafe in a Japanese game. I think it's already very clear that Nintendo did their homework. As a quick side note, Brewster's coffee varieties aren't included in New Horizons Roost directly, but the bag of coffee beans can be customized into the 3 other varieties, as well as a new one, decaf. These bags can then be seen behind the counter at the Roost, confirming their continued use. With the beans accounted for, let's move on to Brewster's equipment. Across all iterations of the Roost, Brewster has a grinder of some sort on the counter. Usually it's a manual grinder, but in New Horizons he appears to have upgraded to an electric one, with the classic mill being stowed on the shelf behind him. The grinder is very critical to the quality of coffee, and ideally the coffee would be ground within 20 minutes of brewing, as ground coffee appreciably stales after that time. We never see Brewster grind coffee, but we also never actually see him brew any either. Let's assume, to maximize quality, that the coffee is freshly ground directly before brewing. Speaking of brewing, how does Brewster brew? In Wild World and City Folk, this is a bit hard to ascertain. In both games, he has some sort of apparatus with a bottom chamber of brown and a top chamber of also brown. It's difficult to say definitively what this is, but thankfully the visual fidelity of New Horizons is quite illuminating. We can very clearly see in this game that Brewster uses an apparatus called a coffee siphon, or a vacuum brewer. So what is a coffee siphon? The theory behind it is quite interesting. You see, the coffee siphon... But I'm tired of just describing things I read about online to you. Is this whole video just going to be a Wikipedia summary? In fact, I was so bored by that prospect that when I reached this point in a first draft of this script, I stopped working on it completely. And that was in January. In the weeks that followed, my path forward became clear. I couldn't reasonably afford to procure Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee and Kilimanjaro and compare them or something, but I could afford a siphon. I wanted a siphon. In fact, I got 2 siphons, but we'll get to that. Allow me to expound extemporaneously about my siphons. Alright, I'm going to use 4 photos from the first time I used my siphon to try and explain the mechanics of how the siphon works. First, water is boiled in the lower chamber. Here I'm using an aftermarket butane burner instead of the alcohol burner that comes with these. Once the water is boiling, the top chamber is applied, a seal being formed between the two. Steam from the boiling water pushes the water up into the upper chamber. Here, coffee grinds are applied and carefully stirred. The siphon environment creates an equilibrium in which the upper chamber is always kept just south of boiling. This is an ideal temperature for brewing coffee. After about 90 seconds, heat is removed from the lower chamber, and in this case I used a wet towel to cool it down even faster. The now colder temperature in the lower chamber creates low pressure, pulling a slight vacuum from the top chamber and pulling the coffee through the grinds and a very fine filter. This allows the siphon to pull coffee with a body and oils like French press, but with a clarity of flavor more akin to filter coffee like pour over. It truly is, in many ways, the best of both worlds. And now I'd like to show you it all in action. When I first got my siphon, I strictly used a stainless steel filter, thinking it would be more like the French press coffee that I was familiar with. Traditionally, siphon coffee is made with a cloth filter, which seemed like a lot of work because it has to be kept wet in the fridge to prevent bacterial growth. However, Brewster almost certainly uses a cloth filter, so I decided that for this video, I'd try it too. But that's more than enough of my yapping. Now I'd like to let the siphon method speak for itself. And there you have it, the siphon method from bean to cup. I'm no master of using it yet, but I've already found the coffee made by the siphon to be far better than the French press I was used to. The siphon method, including with the cloth filter, doesn't sacrifice the body, or mouthfeel, and oils of French press, while providing new clarity of flavor. I could really taste the nuances with siphon-made coffee. Now then, besides the basics of making his coffee, Brewster has two noteworthy quirks that greatly impact the quality of what he serves. The first is his staunch insistence that the coffee be drank immediately after brewing, believing it to be at the optimal temperature for flavor. Interestingly, however, this is not true, at least not in humans. Different compounds are more perceptible in different temperature ranges, but Brewster's recommended temperature is, in the treehouse localization of city folk, 176.36 degrees Fahrenheit. This is literally too hot to taste any good, and it's hot enough that it could actually be painful. An interesting wrinkle that I only learned after getting my siphon is that siphon coffee is significantly hotter than other coffee because it is kept in that equilibrium just below boiling. Given the siphon's importance to Japanese coffee culture, I suspect that Brewster's insistence that you drink it immediately is specifically a joke about painfully hot siphon coffee. Thankfully, anyone who goes to the Roost often enough can eventually gain Brewster's favor and be allowed to let it cool somewhat. In New Horizons, he even says that he's made a coffee specifically for the most sensitive mouth to drink without delay. I don't really understand how this would work in the siphon brewer, so I'm choosing to parse this sentence as him having specifically made coffee ahead of time and allowed it to cool so that there would be no delay to the customer, rather than no delay from brew time. If it's even possible to brew cooler in the siphon, I suspect the end result would likely be notably under-extracted and sour. Now, Brewster's second quirk is a bit more interesting. After a few trips to the Roost, Brewster will offer you some pigeon milk with your coffee. This sounds like a pleasant accommodation at first, but the biologically inclined will realize that pigeons aren't mammals and do not produce milk. Pigeon milk instead refers to a regurgitated secretion from birds' crop, a pre-digestive tract. Yes, I'm sure, as many of you already know, pigeon milk is effectively bird vomit, given to their young. While it's sort of nice that Brewster is taking care of you, pigeon vomit sounds gross. So, what does pigeon milk taste like? Let's cross that bridge when we get there. For now, I'm going to try my best to recreate Brewster's coffee at home. Alright, so here are the beans I'm going to be using. It's the Filter Blend from James Hoffmann's company. It's a third wave blend, so I think it's a good analog for Brewster's blend in New Leaf. I'm measuring out my beans now, about a 1:15 ratio, and I'm about to soak my cloth filter. The footage I showed earlier was actually my first time using the cloth filter. That's why it looked so clean. After you use it, it gets brown. Grinding my coffee, and here's my pigeon milk. Yep, it's flax milk. Birds eat seeds, flax is a seed, flax seed, and it had protein added, pea protein. So it seems like it would be good for the fledglings, right? Helps them grow. Just, get that, yeah, all right. Pour out some pigeon milk, And to really give it a regurgitated tang, I decided to add a little bit of, apple cider vinegar. Yeah, that's gonna give it a nice stomach acid feel. Ooh, look, it's already curdling. Alrighty, let's get our water boiling now. I pre-boil the water just to save on butane and also to help the heating of the glass. If you boil the water in the glass entirely from cold, it's more strain on the glass, and also you can have some other problems with the equilibrium. It's just easier to pre-boil the water. The filter is held in place with a spring. The footage I showed earlier, I had a little lampshade pull tab. That's what that's doing. It hooks onto the bottom of the tube. Water's going up, always a fun part. Adding our coffee grinds, of course. And we're stirring. I stir a couple times. I use a wet towel to help cool it down, as I mentioned before. I'm not sure how traditional this is, but I think it really helps. It really pulls the coffee out of the grounds. Alrighty, let's pour our first cup. It really does look good in this footage. And we're adding a little bit of that pigeon milk. Yeah, look at those curds. Look at the curdling. Yeah, that's pigeon milk, all right. And, oh, geez, why does it look like that? It'll stir out, right? It'll stir out. Yeah. Yummy. Alrighty. It really looks alive. I don't know why exactly it. Whatever. Looks aren't everything. Let's try it. Okay, let's try it again. Maybe Brewster doesn't, low stomach acid, right? Maybe it doesn't have to be sour, right? We can just other end. That good man. Good job. Yeah, see, that looks nice. And it was nice. It was pretty good. Now we're going to try the fresh cup. Nice and hot. Brewster approved. Ow. And for this cup, I cleaned my implements. I've got my filter soaking again. And yeah, this is the one, y'all. That's good. That's really good at that temperature. You really taste all of the little flavor notes. So in conclusion, I'd rate Brewster's coffee as follows. Before he chills out and lets your coffee chill, I'd give it a 3 out of 5. It's just too hot to really perceive and enjoy. After he lets it cool, it gets an obvious 5 out of 5. I'm no master barista, so I wouldn't say this exact cup is 5 out of 5, but I've been so impressed by the majesty of the siphon brewer that I have to assume I'd absolutely love Brewster's coffee. With the first attempt at pigeon milk, it's an obvious 0 out of 5, but the low stomach acid pigeon milk is a pleasant 4 out of 5. That being said, though, I suspect now that neither analog was close to the real thing. Apparently, pigeon milk is pretty thick and fatty to help the fledglings grow, so I really should have put in, country crock or something. I don't want to waste any more coffee, though, so the flaxseed will do. Alright, and I think that just about does it. Thank you all for joining me on this journey into Brewster's coffee. It's taken me a long time to get this video out, with a lot of crappy filler videos in between, but I'm glad I took it as deep as I could. I don't leave the comments open on these videos, but if you know me and have means of contacting me, feel free to send some suggestions my way. I'd love to come back for round 2. Alright, I'll see you all next week for the last video of Animal Crossing Month.